So Roundup was yesterday. We talked about 14 different games, but today we're talking to you about the, 5 big ones from companies you're going to recognize, names you're going to know here in the second week of January. Fantastic, because this is going to be an interesting test of the wallet. Because end of December, early January, people's wallets are busting full of, glorious holiday goodies waiting to be spent. And so I feel like some of these projects, sometimes when there's these lulls, people throw money at stuff because they can, not because they should. That being said, let's go. What do we got on the horizon this week? And the 16th is probably by far and away the biggest day of the month right now as we speak. That's because, first up, we're having Conan. Conan is coming back to us from Monolith, the Red Nails expansion with a versus mode as well. Conan, the original sort of jump in from Monolith, with Mythic Battles, which also recently announced that they're doing Egypt finally later this year. But that aside, they're doing this first. This was sort of a completely different system of one versus all that we really hadn't seen before, that then they incorporated into the Batman series, albeit maybe slightly less successfully, although it made Godzooks of money, and I don't know if people were as happy with it. Now, Conan is just a weird mystery bucket for me, because people seem to really like it, and it seems to tickle people's nostalgia fancy, so I don't really know what to make of it. I was a backer, actually, the first time around, and I just didn't really like it. And that's okay. But some of the secondary expansion stuff was absolutely incredibly difficult to get on the retail scheme of things, and so we're going to see what they have in store for us, and, how balls to the wall is Monolith going to go with this? We've seen other campaigns, boom, here you go, here's everything, right? But with Monolith, I don't know, because they had the other system set up that was going to be like cross-compatible with all their things like a couple years ago that just kind of didn't go anywhere. So are they going to play it a little bit smaller, a little bit more reserved, and kind of bring out the big guns for Egypt? I don't know. This is going to be a test of the market that I have no idea, but it's Conan, it's miniature heavy, and it's probably going to raise a couple $1 million, unless it sort of has the Batman diminishing returns too, where people, had some sunk cost fallacy there, I think, where they were like, I need to get it, I need to get it, I need to get it, or they just really loved it. And I think that's going to be what you're going to see there as well. But can it attract new people? I hope it can. I hope they made some upgrades. I hope it looks awesome. But we'll see, because that's the first big miniature test game of the year in that aspect. So I lied. Actually, we're doing 6 this week, because also just announced this weekend, CMON, the reprint, over on GameFound. Now, I haven't seen any good explanation, and maybe I've just missed it at this point, about why they're going over to GameFound, but it's really a reprint with just a tiny bit of new content, like 2 new characters or something along those lines, right? But the real difference, and I'm wondering if this ties into it as well, is that now they're allowing shipping for the whole world, I think. Not just North America like it was the first time around, because you had Archon and then you had CMON, and right, the IP was split between Europe and North America. And so now other people can get it outside of North America, which is great if you're interested in it. But are you interested in the plastic that looks like the time frame in which the game or the IP was originally made? So that was kind of my turn off. I mean, I am a relatively big fan of One vs. Alls. But this one just didn't do anything for me nostalgia-wise, and they say it's the evolution of the Rise of Moloch system, which is, a nice system I liked. It's a little hard to keep track of if you haven't played it in a while. You can do fully cooperative as well, and the He-Man side of things. By the way, I also have a t-shirt, if you've never seen me wear that on the channel, right? It's Grayskull Power Company. No one ever gets the joke, but it's at least somewhat relevant here. I don't know. Nostalgia, plastic, miniatures, CMON, One vs. All. Again, if you have any of those monikers or games already in your collection, you're going, how much more do I need of that as well, with the CMON price point that went in the first time? So, I mean, it's great that they're offering some of the stuff more widely available to the rest of the world. It's awesome that they're offering the exclusives that were there before again. But what's going to be the incentive? Or if you're one of those people previously, is it going to add on anything? Is it going to give you a better game? Is it going to be a, 1.03 version, with apps nowadays? That little bit of an upgrade, streamline, quality of life benefit? The only big thing I can see really at this point is that there are, about the usual amount of people asking for an updated rule book over from the forum section in terms of errata and just gameplay as a whole. Speaking of that, even with the next two, actually, Last Light and Among Cultists, you know, the rule book could use a notch up on each and every one of those. But are you going to go in for this now that reviews, now that some comments, now that some thoughts are out on this? I mean, that's the one other benefit that we've seen that we have not seen a ton with other CMON games. When they come around, again, oftentimes there's a different, you know, whatever, zombie side, right? So it's nuanced enough that you can't necessarily base your opinion off of the previous one. Whereas with this one, I mean, it's the same game with a slight puff. We'll check it out. We'll see what it raises. Let's go. Now, going in a completely opposite direction, we're going to go with the one that is trying to grab the coattails in a positive way, not negging or not disparaging this whatsoever, of Blood in the Clocktower. And that's Among Cultists. Sort of a more accessible, slightly different version with moving through rooms rather than having the diversity of cast and the storyteller, if you will. But this is Among Cultists. And hopefully I'm going to have a video out in the next 2 days so that I can tell you a little bit more of my thoughts on it, because they sent it to me to review. And it's an absolutely smashing success of a social deduction game, folks. But just like, and that's where the comparison to Blood on the Clocktower comes in, is that it's more complex. It's a little bit heavier. There's a little bit more nuance than, say, anything along your Werewolf Mafia side of things. You know, it's probably difficulty to learn wise less than this, but more so than any of those other ones that are particularly out there otherwise. And so the question with a game like this is, does it fill a niche that is actually needing to be filled in your collection, in the hobby? I don't know. We're seeing things like this in Blood in the Clocktower, which are going to be heavier and longer now, that, you know, are relatively meeting some good success. But let's be also clear, they are a niche within a niche within a niche. And that's what Among Cultists is too. And again, nothing wrong with that. But is it right for you? And that's going to be probably the biggest talking point of my video more than anything else, right? Not that it's a good game or not, but how does this fit into what you have in front of you in terms of playstyle, length, complexity, people, meta? That is what this game has more so similar to Blood in the Clocktower. This is not going to be a game where it's a one-off. This is a game that gets repeated play and evolves and potentially meta evolves as you go along. Now they're bringing us more content in addition to the 2 expansions that were along the first ride. So we're going to see, what does this stuff bring new? And any new expansions in a system like this, do you need them all? Is there going to be an expansion or 2 that inevitably fits you better? Talking about it from yesterday's video, the Silver, saga from Bezier, I looked at that and said there's 6 of those games and you can buy them all, but frankly speaking, 1 or 2 of them are probably going to be and the rest are probably going to be like, meh. Right? I've got 2 copies of Oriflamme. I've got the Oriflamme and the Oriflamme expansion, and then there's like a 3rd Oriflamme out there, right? Like, you're going to pick your flavor of Oriflamme. Tournament at Camelot, Tournament at Avalon, right? Like, people have their preferred. They're so similar, they're overlapping, there's slight nuances, but ultimately, inevitably, people almost always say, I prefer one over the other, and I only really need one in my collection. Just kidding. You can have both, but let's be realistic. Dune Imperium Uprising is better. Anyway, though, that is also launching on the 16th. Going up head-to-head with that over on GameFound, as well, is the Last Light reprint and expansion, which again, as a 4X self-contained 60-minute game with little deluxeified planets and plastic miniatures to go along with it, I mean, the relative reception since its delivery in the last 2 months prior to this reprint redo campaign has been relatively successful and met with very positive force, and it's coming out at retail and it's awesome. But you heard me neg on that earlier, beginning of December, end of November, when you lead your campaign advertisements with, we're giving you a better rule book. Like, that's not necessarily endearing to me. Now, it's grateful, but it just goes to show that, like in general, I'm not saying one side crowdfunding the other, retail, like in general, QA for rulebooks just needs to be better across the hobby scene. Again, whole nother tangent video as a whole. Again, little Liege tangent of I should never have to learn a game solely by watching a video. But that aside, I don't know if this, or my fear, my trepidation, my comment last month on the don't get it at the retail video was, you know what, folks, if you don't like 4X, playing it in 60 minutes scrunched up quickly probably isn't going to change your opinion on it either. I mean, maybe it is because it's more accessible. Maybe it is because you can bling the hell out of it from the get-go, but is it though? There are just some mechanisms widely across the board that I am not able to get as quite much of an enjoyment factor out of as I would like. And I would argue you are the same as me. Like, you might not like dexterity. You might not like abstract. Blasphemy, but it's true. Some people somehow don't like abstract games. And if that's you, like, you can go play Hive, or you can go play Tak, or you can play Czar, or Yinch, or Zerts, or any of the other dozen ones that are amazing, freaking, and should be in everyone's collection. Tongue-in-cheek here, I know. I'm just roll with me here. But that's going to be true, right? Even if I introduce you to a new one, necessarily. Now, there are going to be a few that might pique your interest, and really, but overall, you still may say, you know what, abstracts aren't for me, Chris. And that's sort of the same thing with 4Xs. Or if it's, you know, area control, or if it's worker placement, or if it's, you know, dice chucking, you know, beer and pretzels. You know what I'm saying. That's going to be the question. And this game, because they have blinged the hell out of it from the get-go, it's a very expensive pretty penny. So, like I said, this is going to be an interesting test of how much money are people just willing to throw at stuff. Because expansion stuff is also what we're talking about with a considerable number of these things we've already talked about now. 3 in a row. Why are you getting it? Expansion stuff, expansion stuff, expansion stuff. Right? Again, the age-old debate. Is it better to have more expansions for a game that you already own and love? Or do you need other games because you're not going to play through half the content for that game in the first place, let alone utilize 3 more expansions for it no matter how much you love it? So what side of that scale do you fall on? Because you can make the argument that, you know, I don't really like either of them, terribly speaking, but it's something to consider. And, you know, we all fall on one side or the other for some games and for other games, right? Myself included. I'm not pointing at you, I'm pointing at me as well. Bullet, Spirit Island, right? I don't need any more of that. I'm going to buy it all, right? But I don't need it. And where do you draw that line? And this is a little bit of a test of that element as well. And speaking of things, though, this is going to be a standalone expansion, but this is Spire's End Rangitaki. Spire's End, it's the solo game, card-driven, pressure luck style game. And people really seem to like the first 2. So how different is the third one going to be? What sort of mechanistic difference is this going to bring to us? I mean, the first 2 are standalone. So if you have the third, again, how different is it going to be? Are you going to like it? I mean, it reminds me more in a vague sense. Let's stick with my bad analogies and rants here on the side tangent, and let's call it more like a Nemesis, if you will. Nemesis 1, Nemesis 2, and Nemesis 3. Nemesis A, Nemesis B, Nemesis C. I can make a little rhyming thing with this, but that's what you're going here with Spire's End, essentially, right? That's like your Resists versus your Witchcrafts, the solo game in that sense. Or your Undaunteds, right? Like, which version of this simulator of whatever type or ilk is your preference? And so the main thing I'm looking for on this crowdfunding page is, why is this one different? Why would I buy this one? If I have the other 2, what is my incentive? What is my rationale for getting this one? Because, again, like, I am not primarily a solo gamer. I'm not against solo games, though. See my review recently of 20 Strong or Voidfall. But is it going to appeal? Like, when I look at these games, again, as we just mentioned, things outside your normal comfort zone, what as a non-solo person is going to get me interested in this? What as a non-solo person is going to entice me to look at this more if I know that solo games aren't for me? Like, that's the stuff that I find most useful on a crowdfunding page. That's the thing I find when I go to the comment section on Board Game Geek and I say, what don't people like about this? Click, this is a negative for them. This is a negative for them. This is a negative for them. Oh, I don't care about those negatives. This game is going to be awesome for me, right? And this is why I should just start my own side business consulting on crowdfunding pages instead of doing the YouTube channel. I could make a lot more money doing that probably. That's a whole nother video though, because I'm ranting about a different service that's doing that and it's bringing stuff in a FOMO different way. That video to be soon in the upcoming week. However, apart from that, we also have Kabuto Sumo's latest expansion. Now, again, this is going to be standalone. Sakura Slam. They're bringing a squared circle to the actual squared circle. And they call it a squared circle because a wrestling ring is, well, a square. It's got 4 corners, right? And if you're familiar with Kabuto Sumo in the first place, the first edition and the expansion are round. And you push your little pieces from your little stand next to it that goes right along the edge, and you push them and it knocks them off slowly. And you have little abilities and you can upgrade and you can have some asymmetry there. And that's awesome. Well, this one is actually going to give you corner posts that you're going to have to utilize in almost even a tag team action, I believe, as well. And it's going to bring a different dynamic. But again, I would make the argument that if you weren't a fan of Kabuto Sumo in the first place, the gameplay probably, I don't know, no hands on here, isn't going to be different enough for you to warrant wanting this one. But the aesthetic is amazing, just like the first two. So it's going to have some backers just from that side of things. Allplay is putting out a solid line of games nowadays, so I don't know if they're doing any others with that at the time of me filming this. I mean, because recently all of their crowdfunding campaigns have been a trio, at least, if not a quadrilogy. We'll go with that term because I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. But that's going to be more of my question. I'd be completely okay if they just did a solo one-off there. I mean, they probably wouldn't raise as much money, but again, like, you know, with the money being split 3 ways and making more versus one and just whatever it is, who cares, right? So we'll see what they've got else offered. I mean, there's a little promo expansion that usually goes along with it. They have a slight deluxification that'll kind of entice you. And if there's more than one game, you can get a bundle and save a bunch of money, even though paying more is not going to save you more. So that's going to be another interesting test to see how people really feel like that one has stood up the test of time as well. Now, next one that you're going to recognize that comes from a company that you will know is Thunderworks Games' latest, and this is going to be outside of their role player jurisdiction, and this is Metrorunner, where this is a, cyberpunk meets worker placement style with drafting and route building. So they're going with a competitive worker placement set collection game in this high-tech future scenario. I mean, this is like Cyberpunk, the worker placement game, essentially, right? Like CMON did the Cyberpunk area control game. This is going for more of the worker placement vibe as a whole. I mean, you're carving your path, you're going and cutting off other runners, hacking, breaching firewalls, thriving on the black market, and spending your credits wisely to, well, essentially control the city by the end of the game. No details whatsoever. I did, however, recently get an email from them asking if, reviewers wanted to get in touch with them about getting a prototype copy in the near future. And, I'm imagining all of the big names are going to be the ones that got it, because this email was like, literally earlier this week before I filmed this. And so I'm imagining that, these prototype waves around are going to be for the people who haven't gotten it yet. And you know what? That's okay. I am, legitimately second, round usually in these situations now that I've seen. And that's okay, because it's very interesting to see, okay, what changes campaign, mid-campaign, post-campaign, especially with thoughts on these games, depending on, who, what, where, how. So we're going to see something slightly different from them. It reminds me more of Burnt Island games In Too Deep a little bit. But again, that wasn't really a worker placement game either, but the vibe and the aesthetic is just very similar to that. So there's like one preview at the time of me filming this. So there's not a whole lot of information. And the question is, with a worker placement game like this, with these dynamics, with these mechanics, how different? What's the incentive? Thunderworks has not typically done a lot of the exclusives. They've given you maybe a slight price discount on their campaigns during the campaign, but we haven't seen a ton elsewhere, except for maybe the cartographer style of stuff, where they've given us, again, a little incentive, a little promo pack. I think even Stone Spire Architects did the same thing. So Dawn of Ulos in that same line as well. So we'll see what Thunderworks has in store for us. So those are the big ones launching this week. And we'll kind of see where that goes. Again, hopefully I will have my video out in either tomorrow or on Monday of Among Cultists, giving you a few of my more deep thoughts on it, how it compares, and what you need to know for going into the campaign if you are interested in the first place. Apart from that, again, just trying to get stuff played this weekend. My kids had 3 snow days out of the last 5 days. They canceled school on Friday before Thursday's evening was even there, right? Like 4 p.m. on Thursday, they canceled school on Friday because we're supposed to have a huge storm. And maybe it'll be a huge storm. And maybe I'll be snowed in at the time of you watching this. And who knows? I live in Michigan, right? It's Michigan. If you haven't been in Michigan, it's just like crazy weather all the time. So, especially in the winter. But that's literally all I've got going on. I've got to get a few other games played for a few other rounds because I really want to get my top games of 2023 out still this month. I'm going to do it. I'm going to get it out this month. I've got a few other games from publishers, small publishers that they've sent me, including Utopia, including Age of Rome, games you may or may not have even heard of from that aspect of things. I don't know if you've heard of them, but I have them in my collection. And we'll see where we go because we're getting inching closer to 10,000. Right? I don't know. I got nothing else. Got to get Senjutsu played more. Got to get Marvel Zombies played more. Just got a copy of World Wonders from Arcane Wonders. So we'll get that played as well in the near future. And I'm going to hopefully have I've been saying this for like a month. It feels like Matt Damon on the Jimmy Kimmel Show. My review of Tamashii and Expeditions out very soon. So we'll hopefully get that done as well too. That's probably the hardest thing to do is film reviews because of the setup and teardown, in case you're not aware. So it just is always like a daunting task. But once you get into it, once I get into the throes of it, like I'm fine with it, right? I completely ad-lib, I completely go off the cuff, and I completely freestyle all of this. Smooth like butter, like a criminal undercover. Anyway, just like that. So that's what you get. And, you know, if you're lucky, you get also the Darth Vader. Boom, 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 boom. It's my channel. I can do whatever I want at the end of my videos. I guarantee you don't see any of this, though, on anyone else's channel. Boom! And that's why I'm your second-tier YouTuber. With a little bit of board game information, opinion, and guaranteed something to get me in trouble almost on a weekly basis at this point, it feels like. So, messing up numbers, messing up rules. I try. That's all I can say. And if I mess up, please just be gracious with me. And don't totally try and chop me down, because I'm a person too. That's all I got. Have a great day. See you around. Stay classy. And by the way, like I said yesterday, maybe I will do shortly my favorite movies and TV shows of 2023 too. You know, on a board game channel. Because why not? Again, like I said, my channel. Peace out. I'm also reading a manga right now called Solo Leveling. I'm actually really liking it. It's really good. I suggest checking it out. First, check out Tower of God, but Solo Leveling as the next one up. So, there you go.